are on TV now.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Goffstown Planning Board. Today is Thursday, May 14th. We have an agenda, and in light of the current COVID situation, I am calling our first. Hi, Jennifer, this is Barbara Griffin. We are beginning the meeting. You don't need to come right in. We're doing formalities, but heads up, okay? Well, why don't you sort of make your way in, and if you stay out in the hall or something, come in a couple of minutes, and then we'll be all set to go. I think you've got Attorney Mullen out there also, right? Yes. Okay, so come on in like 5 minutes. So that was a call to our first applicant to have them come in. This is an electronic meeting tonight in accordance with the emergency issues that are going on. So in accordance with that, I'm going to read a right-to-know checklist that applies in these electronic meetings. As chair of the Goffstown Planning Board, due to the COVID-19 outbreak and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. There is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with that emergency order, this is to confirm that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are using a telephone conference line for this electronic meeting. The public has access to listen and, if necessary or desired, to participate in the meeting through dialing the following telephone number. The number is 603-766-5646, and use the participant code 785-645 followed by the pound sign. We are providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting that has previously been given, and we have provided a mechanism for the public to alert us if there are problems with access. Phil, did you want to say something? No? Okay. If anybody has a problem with telephone access, please call 603-660-5000. We will adjourn the meeting if public access becomes impossible, but we need you to call that number to let us know that it's not possible. Please note that all votes in this meeting will be taken by roll call, and we're going to start the meeting by asking everybody to identify themselves, and also identify whether or not anybody is with them during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So with that, I'm going to start with the individuals in this room. Tim, why don't we start with you?
Tim Redmond.
David Pierce, an alternate member.
Thank you.
Gail Lebrecht, alternate member and recording secretary.
Patty?
Patty Gale, planning assistant.
My name is Barbara Griffin. And then now I'm going to turn to the people who are attending by phone. Karen?
Karen Hughes?
And are you alone?
I am alone, sorry.
Okay. Jim?
James Raymond, I am alone.
Thank you. Kimberly?
Kimberly Hughes, and I am alone.
Phil?
Bill Devans, and I'm alone.
And Peter?
Peter Georgantis, Selectman's Rep, and I am alone.
So that means we're either all hermit-like individuals, or we can't talk anybody in our households to have anything to do with planning board meetings. I'm not sure which it is. All right. Thank you, everybody, for checking in and answering the roll call. The first item on our agenda tonight is correspondence and action items, and in that regards, we have the minutes of the April 23rd meeting. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the minute that's presented.
Peter, thank you. Is there a second?
Seconded, but there's just a slight typo on page 7.
Phil, could you point that out for us, please?
In the motion, it's seconded by Peter Georgantis, seconded the motion, period, seconded the motion, period. The second the motion should be struck.
Thank you. Any other corrections to the minutes? I will take that motion to approve with that correction. If there are no further corrections, I'm going to call for a vote. That vote will be by roll call. At this time, we have full attendance, so I do not need to appoint an alternate. Tim?
I'm in favor of the minutes being approved as presented.
Karen?
I'm abstaining.
Jim,
Yes.
Kimberly,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. The minutes are approved. The next, that is the only correspondence action that needs to be taken. The next item on our agenda is the election of officers. With every year, we elect a new chair and vice chair. We're a little late this year. So at this time, I will open it up for nominations for chair.
Barbara, I'd like to nominate Barbara Griffin for chair.
I'll second that.
Peter has nominated myself, and Phil has seconded to nominate me as chair. Are there other volunteers or nominations for chair? All right, I'm going to close the nominations and call for a vote. Roll call vote on the nomination of myself to continue as chair. Tim?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
All right. The next on the agenda is the nomination of a vice chair. Kimberly, you are currently serving as vice chair. Would you like to continue?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that.
All right.
I'll make that motion if you need me to.
Is there a,
I'll second it.
it's been moved and seconded to have Kimberly be the vice chair. Are there any further nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, I will call for a roll call vote. Tim?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
I vote yes. Kimberly, you are vice chair again. Thank you, everybody. We have an issue of appointment of CIP members. I would like to wait to deal with that because I have called the first application in and they are here in the hallway. So I'm gonna, with the board's permission, we're gonna move right to our first item of old business, which is map 5, lot 60, relief from the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland surface water conservation district. This is a site plan subdivision review of Mass Road Crossing LLC. This is located on South Mass Street, Mast Road, for a proposed 42-unit condominium development for 55 years old and older that will be partially located in the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland surface water conservation district buffer. The proposal is for 19 duplex unit buildings and 1 fourplex unit building. The property is zoned commercial industrial flex zone and is located in the wetland surface water conservation district overlay. This is continued from the April 9th meeting. This application has been previously accepted. It has been accepted with waivers that were accepted for purposes of getting the application on the table only. Joanne, why don't you bring us up to date on this?
So we have 4 waivers that the board will need to act on. We also have a request for relief from the 100-foot surface water conservation district where there is an encroachment of 11 feet for grading purposes that needs attention, and there are some outstanding issues as far as them as conditions of approval. The 2 biggest items that were left hanging from the last meeting were wording of the declaration, as the condo declaration, as far as the appropriate age requirements. Attorney Mueller has produced an amended document, which you should all have. It was reviewed by our town attorney. You all should have a copy of an email that he sent with his comments, and he made 2 suggested changes on the condo declaration on pages 19 and 21, which you also have copies of.
Has the applicant seen that?
No, I have not shared any of that yet with the applicant. I wanted the board's permission, since it was attorney-client privileged information. The other item was the waiver of the school impact fee, which was also addressed in the email from our attorney. The remainder of the items are included as conditions of approval. I do have a few comments when we get to that section. I just need to remove some language and add an additional, but we can talk about that later.
Okay, so the application has been completed and accepted with notice. I do believe we have some people here, some people online for comment. The waivers requested dealt with the lighting, the impact fees as you've referred to, and there was also some drainage and pond access issues, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And there is also a relief from the district, which you have previously described as now being a much smaller intrusion into the outer 50, correct?
Correct, it's down to 210 feet from 7.
All right. Are there any changes in this plan from the last time we saw this applicant?
So the plans are exactly the same as they were submitted back at the end of March. I believe we received the plans on March 27th.
Okay. Patty, can I ask, is the plan being shown on the screen or not?
We can do that if you'd like.
Yeah.
Madam Chair? If I were a voting member, I would recuse myself. Would you prefer I do that?
No, you're not voting. Stay put. Besides, nobody's really here anyways. All right, hold on. I'm trying to see if we can get the technology to work so people can actually see this plan.
twice?
Just warming up.
Oh, there, okay, so hopefully folks at home, no, I just wanted it up because I want people to be able to see everywhere what we're looking at, because I know the plan, the colored plan is great for us here in the room, but it's not so helpful if you're trying to look online. All right, Joanne, do you have anything else you want to present to the board before we hear from the applicant?
No, I can wait on the other items as far as the conditions of approval.
All right, because I do want to run through them before we open, we need to discuss them before we at least need to get them on the table before I open the public hearing.
Okay.
So let's hear from the applicant, they can run through them, and then I think we have at least one person online for public comment. All right, Jennifer, Attorney Mullen, somebody speak.
I will start. Dan
Okay.
Muller from Cronin Bissell and Zelinski on behalf of the owner and applicant Master Road Crossing. Last time we were here, I'm going to focus my discussion on the two waivers, the impact fee and the access to the detention pond.
Okay.
You should have a letter from April 23rd. I'm not going to repeat everything in there. I'm going to try to summarize to move this along. Essentially on the impact fee waiver, after the last hearing went back and amended the declaration, in particular the age restriction covenant was the primary focus. And what we did is we went with something, the town of Hooksett actually in their zoning ordinance has a housing for older persons provision, and they have requirements, and we basically borrowed their requirement. And the requirement is at least one person 55 in each unit, and other occupants cannot be under the age of 40. In my letter, I explain why that is lawful. Essentially, housing for older persons, 55 plus or 62 plus, if you create such housing under the state statute 354A, if you're lawful housing for older persons, you are exempt from both the age discrimination and the familial status discrimination provisions of that statute. Go through an explanation in the letter. At the federal level, there's actually no prohibition on age discrimination. It's only on familial status, which is people who essentially have children under 18, for lack of a better term. And the federal statute, which the state has sort of incorporated the same, or is trying to mirror the same thing, basically says you can discriminate against people, in that case based on familial status. You could say these, if you allow people in, say if a minimum 55 plus, where you only need 80% of the units occupied by at least one person 55 or older. If you have families, you can discriminate in terms of the terms and conditions that are otherwise available to people 55 plus. So, from my perspective, since the statute basically says if you're 55 plus, and you just have to meet the minimum to be 55 plus, that means you have to have 80% of the units have to be occupied by somebody 55 or older. The federal government has made clear that you can be more stringent than that. You just can't fall below that minimum. So what this does, because there was a concern last time about if you had people getting in who were 21, 18, essentially the only way under these documents you'll have somebody who is 21, 20, something like that, is if you had to make a reasonable exception under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that would be true whether this was 62 plus, a regular 55 plus, makes no difference. So this is as, from my perspective, legally, this is as protective as you can get to keep school-age children from living in this facility. There is also, if you notice, there is a change made in terms of the common area to make clear that things like playgrounds, sandboxes, things of that nature are not going to be improvements that are going to be allowed. Again, consistent with the intent here, which is this is going to be a 55-plus community where you have at least one person who's 55. You could have a spouse who is as young as 40, but that would be the limit. So with that in mind, and based on your zoning ordinance, we are looking for the waiver on the impact fee.
All right, and the second item you wanted to address, which I believe is also in your April 23rd correspondence?
It is, the detention pond. Essentially, there's a concern about the maintenance with that, and again, I'm not going to go through everything, but essentially, if the town wants the right to go on the property, that would have to be through an easement. And point out the case that easements carry with it certain financial obligations for those who benefit from them. There are certain issues in terms of liability. Here, you know, if the state comes in, you have a state approval, and the things that are done by the town don't comport with the state approval. There's a liability issue there. But more importantly, made it much more specific in the condo declaration in terms of Article 5, specifically mention the need to maintain drainage improvements. In addition, added Exhibit D, which is a specific schedule that's incorporated into the declaration for the maintenance of drainage improvements. Be candid, this drainage improvement maintenance schedule came from another municipality. It was something that we had to do in another case, but it gives very specific
Did you see it?
direction. if he would
No,
like.
no, no, go ahead.
Okay, I was just, if someone needs a copy, I'm glad to give them my copy of it, that I have here. But, again, what we're trying to do here is to make it clear that this is going to be a specific requirement in the condo declaration for the association to take care of going forward, so there is no, it minimizes the concern that the town will need to come in and do something. Frankly, given all the issues in terms of easements, it would seem that it would be probably in the town's best interest not to be involved in the maintenance of private property. And again, we've tried to assuage some of the fears by putting something specifically in there. Because I think Jen would speak to this. If the waiver is not granted, we're probably gonna have to go back and look at this again, because there's just not enough room, I believe, between the buildings, and I'll let Jen speak to that, but from my perspective, I'm not, again, I think that sort of hits the major points in that letter, and I don't wanna spend lots of time. I'm sure you've had a chance to read it. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. The other two waivers were in regards to the lighting, and it was a waiver in regards to the requirement throughout the development and in accordance with our regs, and I believe we talked about doing motion detectors on the units, is that right? Where we are,
Yes.
Jen?
Yes, and that would just be a note added to the site plan.
And the fourth waiver was the drainage system, right? The closed drainage system?
Right, not to have the closed drainage system, and the one piece of information that didn't get into your packets last month was the letter from Kim Tuttle from New Hampshire Fish and Game regarding her request as not to have curbing or closed drainage systems because of the endangered species in the area. Also, going through the waiver, it was, it's very flat through here, and if we had to put in a closed drainage system, we'd have to do substantial construction within the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland buffer.
Any questions from board members in regards to the waiver request? Tim?
Thank you. I just want to go back with Attorney Mueller. So, based on what you told us tonight, you would be proposing that at least one resident would be age 55 at the 80% threshold, or we could make it more stringent if we wanted to? Is that what you said?
What I'm saying is we've already made it more stringent. The requirement under the federal law and technically under the state law for 55 plus is that 80% of the units have to be occupied by at least one person who is 55
Okay.
plus. The other 20, can be anybody. What we're proposing, 100% are gonna be at least one person 55 plus.
Okay.
And the only other occupants, because the federal law and the state law focus on occupancy, not ownership. So tenants, whoever is living there, 155 and the other one, minimum age of 40.
That's it. Nice and concise.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members?
I have a question, Barbara. This is Karen Hughes. So, based on what you're saying, it sounds to meet the requirements that I had concerns about at the last meeting. But I'm wondering, do those requirements expire at some point in time? Because I know that Tim had raised that as a concern at our last meeting.
That is an issue for our regs, not the applicant.
Oh,
But but attorney, counsel is going to respond.
I am going to respond because I did see that. And number one, this age restriction may only be amended or terminated with the express consent of the town of Goffstown Planning Board. And I thought I had put something in there, but maybe it got removed. If you want, the other thing that I could add in there, if that is your concern, and I apologize for that, is that to limit the ability to amend that provision for a minimum of 20 years. If that's what it takes to eliminate that issue, I can put in the declaration that not only do you need the express consent of the Town of Goffstown Planning Board, but limit the ability to amend that restriction in terms of the age limits for a period of 20 years.
I think that's what our regulations presently state, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
They-
correct?
They do talk about a minimum 20-year period.
Right.
So that can be, as I said, I thought I had added that in there, but if you look on page 8 of the declaration, paragraph 3, where it gives the ability to the town to A, enforce it, and B, may not be amended without the express consent, can also add a sentence in there that this age restriction may only be amended or terminated after a period of 20 years. And be agreeable to add that in there. So that there's no question.
Other board,
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Tim?
So while you're on page 8, Attorney Mueller,
Yep.
2C, you did add on the bottom that you allow visitation for up to 90 days by people under the age of 40. Is that what I'm reading correctly? For any age?
You know something? The person's on the age of... There is, thank you, there is language there that was there beforehand, but it was meant to, should have been eliminated. It should be persons under the age of 40 years that may visit the owner or occupants of a unit, provided no visit exceeds 30 continuous days, because 30 continuous days is what makes you an occupant there, and that's what you're trying to avoid.
So
So if I strike the language, the and,
after the word continuous day, 30 continuous days, you'd
Correct.
put a period,
put a period,
and then strike the last sentence?
and strike the last phrase there, and by such persons do not exceed 90 days, so it'll only be 30 days max.
Okay.
So they can't be occupants.
Respectfully, I would disagree with that interpretation of what the sentence would mean if you delete the end of it. I don't see any time restriction on the 30 days when you eliminate the 90-day provision.
It reads, persons under the age of 40 years may visit the owner or occupant of the unit, provided no visit exceeds 30 continuous days.
That's what
Right, so you could go 30 days, leave one day, come back the next day, 30 days, leave one day, come back the next day, 30 days. You could get in a heck of a lot more than 90 days in a one-year period that way.
Barbara, if I may.
Can we-
So I'm just thinking
Lawyers
about in
reading
terms of
things
the-
is not a good thing.
I'm just thinking in terms of the impact fees. If we're talking about an occupant being able to stay for 30 days, and they're required to be 40 years old or up, we're not really concerned with, the educational impact, because special education only goes to 21 or age 22, arguably. But I don't know if your point was different than that, but I just wanted to chime in and say that.
My point was that if we delete the last portion of the sentence in paragraph C of 2 on page 8 of the declaration, there is no restriction at all on how many 30-day continuous visits there can be.
Right. Barbara, I agree with you, because if you read that, it says, and visits by such person do not exceed 90 days in any 1 year. So your scenario could be done 33 times, and then they reach that maximum of 90.
Right, which, what I'm saying is if you don't leave the 90 days in, there is no
Right.
maximum.
Right, no, that's what I agree with you.
Unless you say it's 30 continuous days in any 1 year. That's the only way it does what I think Tim was intending. Tim?
So my concern with my question for Attorney Mueller was that a 90-day period allows for a young person to enroll in the school system.
No. I think the intent of it as written, I think, was that it could only be for 30 days, and you
Right.
couldn't do it any more than 3 times at
So
different.
that's 3 months, 90 days,
But
correct?
it would be,
I'm sorry, if you want me to reduce the period, that's fine. It's essentially to allow grandchildren
Right,
or the
right.
like to visit.
Right.
That's the thing, and it
the
just,
summer, December.
Right, I
Yes.
agree.
Okay.
so
I
if you,
think as written, it's fine.
okay.
The paragraph, just no,
As
no
written, it's
emissions.
fine.
Okay.
All right, anything else on the waiver request, board members?
Barbara,
Tim?
we go back to Jennifer with the lighting. You said that the lighting was gonna be strictly attached to the garages or the front doors of the homes. Is that the type of lighting you're talking about?
And the front doors, yes, and over the garage doors, yes,
Right.
and the
But
ones on
no
the,
street lighting on the sidewalks on the edge of the road or anything like that?
no.
And you did state, I believe, at the last meeting, that all lighting fixtures would meet our night sky ordinance. They would have shields on them.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Further,
Barbara?
Phil?
Southern New Hampshire Planning, comments on there, they addressed something on the lighting, and I didn't know if, anybody else took a look at that to see how, that might have, if that had any significance to the lighting issue.
Well, I think their comment was for lighting at access points probably to 114. That's what I sort of took it as.
I'm not sure. I spent more time on the other comments that they had, if I just saw that one.
The comment from Southern New Hampshire was, as lighting information is not provided with the plan, they recommended non-glaring cutoff style lighting at the access egress points to improve visibility of turning movements at night or during poor visibility conditions such as fog. So I understood that comment to mean they wanted something perhaps at the intersections, but I'm not sure, given what's along that road, that's necessary. Board members? I'm not seeing anything. Any other comments from members on the issues? Tim?
So, once again, back to Jennifer, on your closed drainage system. The plan does not propose a closed drainage system at this time, does it?
Correct, no, it does not.
And you're basically asking that we allow you to replace the vertical granite curbing with sloped granite curbing or asphalt berm? Is that what you're,
No.
what are you asking for then?
I'm asking for a waiver of not putting in any curbing and having 3-foot shoulders that go into a ditch line, and then there are culverts under each of the driveways that drain to the detention ponds, infiltration ponds.
Is that shown on the plan presently, Jennifer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was looking for it, I didn't see it. Okay, thank you, I got it.
Other questions from board members on the waivers?
Well, just a comment on that also. Southern New Hampshire did make a couple of comments also on those issues, as far as, well, I don't know if it was specific to that, but I know they addressed parking issues.
I think it was parking. But we-
Yeah,
we
I don't think it was that, but that's what, okay.
It was the parking, and as I recall our discussion last week, the applicant pointed out that they meet our requirements for parking.
Right.
Since then, for board members who have looked, I understand that we got further, this is off of the waiver. Let me stick to the waivers right now before we move on. Any other questions or comments from board members on waivers? All right, I'm not seeing any. I'm not hearing any, seeing any. I don't have any idea what's going on with all of you. As to the report, board members, that you got, your staff report, and Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, was largely the same as previously. One of the changes was that we got a few more comments from the fire department in regards to turn movements if there was on-street parking. and it's my understanding that there has been an agreement with the applicant as to address those. Is that correct? All right, those fire department comments for board members are on page 8 of the staff report that was mailed to you. Joanne, why don't you run through what that is?
I will, if I lose you, my phone is going dead. I'll call you back on my cell phone. So the fire department had recommended that if they were going to have parking along the road, the internal roadways, that they have one side of the street parking in certain locations, which they refer to as the pinch points. The applicant did agree to place no parking signs, 2 areas.
I think we lost her.
She'll call back in. Well,
Call back, I'm losing you.
all right, Gail, in the meantime, why don't you pass this down to council, and he can look at the red on page 19 and 21. I'm making the decision, I know it hasn't been released to him because it came from council, but it's a proposal for a change to condo docs, and we might as well just have him take a look at it. And Eric, keep me on track, we need to deal with the
Thank
issue
you.
of what we're calling that.
Madam Chair? While we're waiting for Joanne, can we address something, or would you rather wait?
Sure, no, Tim, go ahead.
So, I'd like to go back to your request for no curbing and these slopes. You have this statement here from Kim Tuttle, that you mentioned, wildlife.gov. The 3 items mentions a wood turtle, the northern black razor, and eastern hognose snake. Have you identified these 3 species on that site specifically? Or is this a general statement from her?
No, I did, they were in all 3 were found within the area, which they could easily be on the site. I do not believe that they were actually found specifically on the site.
Okay, but they are in proximity to the site.
Absolutely.
What is considered proximity to the site?
I think within a half mile.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Joanne, are you back? She not back yet?
No.
Now she had to go find her cell phone. Usually it's the cell phone that does. All right, any other questions from board members on this plan in regards to any aspects? All right, so anyways, what I had asked Joanne to comment on was the issue with the truck is that her?
Yep, that's her.
Joanne, let us know when you're there.
Oh, I'm here, can you hear me?
Yeah, all right, so why don't you go through the truck movement, no parking issue?
Okay, so, Lieutenant Connor has said that the truck movements were not compatible with the on-street parking on both Villa Lane, in certain portions of Villa Lane and Angel Point. And he recommended that if they were to allow on-street parking, that the pinch points, which are the west entrance through the turning, heading east toward the first building, and the east entrance through to the driveway for building 16. And the applicant did provide us with an email saying that they were in agreement with providing a restriction for one side of the street parking and will supply signage to alert the public.
Okay.
So I wanted to add that as a condition of approval at the end of the conditions.
All right, so it would be condition 28 on the chair's agenda.
Yeah.
So it would be that there would be no parking and signs to be installed in accordance with the fire department concerns.
there
Madam,
would be no parking on, in certain areas on
Right.
one side of the roadway.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Madam Chair, if you look at Joanne's report, I don't have page numbers on here, but it's after the fire department's comments in bold. Specifically lists out, just so that, you know, technically station-wise and everything else is what I proposed back that we would agree to, that I would suggest you put in as a condition.
All right, Gail, do you have that? Yeah. Okay, because I don't, or if I have it, I can't put my hands on it. All right, before I go to any other issues, Eric, you're here from Highway. There is an issue, I think if we go back to page 8, and that's in regards to easements versus maintenance agreements, right?
Yeah, I just wanna touch on that real quick, that's regarding the, detention pond access. So there's no intent for an easement going, for the town to do any maintenance on the detention ponds.
Right.
This is a private site, it's adjacent to a state highway. I think it was kind of misunderstood, that the only time the maintenance agreement would come into play is if the drainage system is neglected and, backs up, causes issues or anything like that. There's no response from the property owner, the town would then have to step in and take care of the maintenance to solve the issue. So that's what the drainage maintenance agreement is there for, it's not an easement. The comments from DPW regarding suggesting, keeping a access road is for general maintenance purposes of anybody on the site maintaining the ponds. If you can't get to the ponds, you can't really maintain them. That's why it was strongly recommended. There's no good access. You can't really come off of 114 because, according to the planting plan, there's, shrubbery and bushes, adjacent to 114, and between the detention pond. Your only access is between, on sheet 5, your, house 8 and 7, and you have a swale going through there, so there's really no good way
Right.
to get any type of equipment, excavator, dump truck, any type of anything. I mean, yeah, you can get a push mower down in there. But if you don't have access, you're not gonna maintain it. You don't maintain it, you're gonna have issues. The same issue was true for, pond IP 68, which is over by Unit 3, and then the other one is IP 527 on sheet 6, which is between units 9 and 10. So in order to get to all those ponds, you have to go right in between a narrow gap between the two.
So Joanne, did you follow that?
Yeah.
All right.
So the discussion from the last meeting was, there was mention made that certain members of the board felt that most condo associations don't do a good job in maintaining things like detention ponds. And there was a concern if something were to happen and it would overflow. So the applicant has tried to address that. I mean, they probably want to say some more about it, but they're saying that, it's written in the documents
Right.
that they must take care of it.
All right, so there's no proposal for an easement to the town, right? I'm just making sure, and I'm gonna let the applicant speak in regards to this issue.
I am going to have to respectfully disagree. I understand, I've seen your standard drainage agreement. The problem is to essentially, if it came to the point that the town wanted to go on, it needs still permission to go on to the site. Now, essentially, the ability to use somebody else's property, it's either a license or an easement, because you're either granting the ability to access to do that, or you're not. And if you don't do it, then there's no general ability to go on. So I think what you are talking about, at least if you're looking for a long-term ability to enter onto the property and do work, to me, that is an easement. Because if it's a license, which is the other possibility, problem with licenses is they're revocable. You know, the owner can say, I don't want you there. I don't know of any other way that it goes. So, again, while the obligation may not be, the right to access the property is what gives rise to the easement. So, I respectfully have a different view on that issue. Obviously, you have your own counsel who may take a different view, but that's my view on it, that giving you the right to access in your discretion to come onto the property and do the work, now, unless you're going to say it can be revoked as a license, would be an easement, because it's the right to do something on somebody else's property, which is what an easement is. And I'll let Jen go to the other point.
From a practical standpoint, this is a condominium development. It's going to be maintained by a maintenance company. They're going to get to all of behind these buildings, in and around these buildings. So they will be able to access that, to mow it and maintain it. That's their job. What I did when I designed, we'll take this pond by, behind Unit 8, and Building 8 and Building 7. The outlet for this pond here is basically just a cut in the berm. And it's a very, the berm itself is only a couple feet high. We're not talking about, this big, huge berm that has to be maintained. We're not talking about a pipe that has to be maintained. All it is a cut in the berm that's grassed so that the water can flow through. So the maintenance for it is extremely easy, and it's not gonna take major equipment down there to be able to maintain it. Again, the maintenance crew is going to go in behind all of these units and mow it and take care of the landscaping and all of that. The individual unit owners are not going to be doing that. Then, I just wanna flip this page so I can look at it. I can put this up too, but when we're talking about getting between Building 9 or between Building 9 and 10, this, again, they're gonna be able to get all behind here. This pipe coming out of here, I believe, sorry, it's been a little bit. I know it's a pipe that does not have any control, it's like not downsized to something smaller. It is it's a 12-inch pipe in a head wall. And so it's, a good-sized pipe to be able to convey the water. Also, right above it, there's a emergency overspill that goes down to where the pipe outlet's down in here. Again, we're talking about a condominium, so the maintenance company is going to be able to access all around the buildings and have the wherewithal to do that because that's their job. And these condo owners are gonna be paying for that service. It's part of the condominium documents.
Barbara,
Joanne?
under the suggested conditions, condition number 11, asks for a maintenance and inspection plan, a schedule for the infiltration basins and swales, and that the plan should include inspection forms to be completed regularly and available for town review, which is normally done when the town doesn't have anything to do with the maintenance of some structure like that. They would at least provide the town with the maintenance schedule and the inspection paperwork so that the town knows that the clean out or whatever it is that they're doing to the ponds has been completed on a regular basis.
Jennifer?
This plan also has to have alteration of terrain permitting, which requires the same thing. We have to put together a maintenance inspection that has to be completed. And so if there is a maintenance problem with one of these ponds, it doesn't just fall on the town. You also have the state that would step in and say, yes, they need to be maintained. You also get into water quality issues with the federal government if they're not maintained. So there's
do I
a
understand 11, as Joanne read it, provide a maintenance and inspection plan schedule for the infiltration basin swales? Should include inspection forms completed regularly for the town's review as required. It's not an issue. I heard council say, and I saw in the condo docs, that there's a specific schedule that's in there. So is that condition a problem if we require it? All right, so the
No.
issue is, do I understand now, at drainage number 10, a drainage maintenance agreement? That's the issue.
That's the issue.
DPW is saying, we don't want an easement, we just want a maintenance agreement. The applicant is saying, I'll give you all the agreements in the world, but it's not gonna give you the ability to do anything, so why are we talking about this? And, it doesn't sound to me like the town can get in to do this maintenance anyways, given the building location. Tim?
So just to touch on that briefly, I won't drag it out. Just to be clear, the buildings are owned by the condo owners themselves, but all the grounds are common area, is that correct?
Essentially, yes. The interior
Yeah,
of all the buildings is generally considered the units by statute. Everything else, the exterior is generally considered part of the common area because they want it to be commonly maintained. That's why roofs are usually covered by reserve funds for condo associations. So everything else except for usually partway in between the walls is common area. There's,
So my question would be is if no owner between 10 and 9 could restrict the other members of the association from exercising cleaning abilities. They can't say, I planted a tree there and you can't go through there. You'd have to tear the tree out. It's not.
number one, they would need approval to put the tree there
Okay.
from the condo association. And no, they cannot say to the association, you cannot use the common area. The association administers and maintains the common area,
So
all the common areas.
So in the event of a catastrophe, as DPW has mentioned, that they would need to go in and take care of it, you still have access on common ground to get equipment in and out of behind those buildings to perform that maintenance on your own.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
And, I know DPW's concern is that, they don't want to put a track machine over there and rip up the lawn and everything, where you're talking about the condominium development itself, they can do that because they're going to fix it as they come out.
Well, I guess what I'm talking about is a requirement of this a drainage maintenance agreement? Because it sounds to me like we're not doing one. Tim?
So the only purpose of a drainage maintenance agreement is to enforce them to do something. I think that they're gonna take care of it on their own to maintain their own property, because otherwise, who's gonna be negatively affected by a failure of that drainage system? Certainly not the town of Goffstown, not the state highway. It's gonna be internal within their own confines of their own project, and they're gonna take care of it. So I really don't see the need for a drainage maintenance agreement myself.
Okay, other board members on this point? Jim?
Mr. Chair, this is Jim. May I be heard?
Yes, Jim, please.
I'm going to let the Department of Public Works assess need. That's their area of expertise on our engineering and design basis and the likelihood of failure. And I think if they make that determination, I shudder to think our board members, maybe except for Tim, have the expertise to say they're wrong. Second, if every applicant that we've seen did what they said they were going to do, we'd never need access to drainage easements. But in fact, notwithstanding the good faith and hopes of the developer, that doesn't happen. And Joanne, you misstated my earlier comment. I don't say most condominiums, in my experience, though, many do not perform the maintenance on the common areas that their common interest would lead you to expect they will, for whatever reason. Usually it's they can't afford it, or they can't get enough people to vote in favor of it. Third, as to the cases cited by Brother Mullen, I respectfully disagree to the concerns. They can be addressed very easily. First of all, in our approval, we can deem it a license, but as a condition of continuing site plan. If they revoke the license, we revoke site plan approval. That will blow up the project in the future. I don't think they'll do that. Second, as to maintenance of the easement, we can specify in the approval that the applicant is required to maintain it. It's not an obligation of the town who states it's theirs. Third, there's a specter of damage. The case cited is an extreme case. I know my firm defended it, the town, of a drainage easement, a pipe rather, flooding land. That's not the case here, so that specter doesn't disturb me. It is more that if the Department of Public Works, the town engineer, thinks we need access or access should be provided, I'm not sure we as a planning board should say, no, you're wrong. And there are two issues. One is, do they have access to do it themselves? Maybe they do. But if they don't, should the town have the ability to go on? If we want to waive that, we can, but don't do it just because we're getting assurances it will be done. That's all I have.
Well, then, Jim,
Barbara, I have a
Jim, having said that, I'd like you to take a look at number 10 on the recommended conditions of approval and ponder what you think, if it should say anything different at all. Phil?
May I address that first before Phil? I'll let Phil.
Oh, sure, go
Phil
ahead,
go on.
go ahead.
A maintenance agreement is just an agreement to do something, but we see they're not always adhered to. And we don't have the ability administratively to go out and inspect them. So they say they're doing it and they don't, or they don't do it and we don't get it, and then there's a problem. Now, we can put in, and I'd want this in, that if we're going to go in that direction, that a failure to provide the maintenance as required by the maintenance agreement is a material violation of site plan approval and is grounds to revoke. That at least gives us some teeth. I'm going to look to the Public Works Department to say how comfortable they are, because our experience, again, with maintenance agreements is they sound good when you put them in, but then when they pile up in somebody's desk and don't get looked at, then they're not maintained. So, yeah, it's nice, but it doesn't address all of the concerns. The Public Works says, Eric says, we don't need access. I'm good with that, but I haven't heard that yet.
And I don't think he's saying that. I just turned around. All right, Phil, did you want to say something?
No, I didn't have any
Peter,
comment.
it was Peter.
Oh, Peter,
I
I'm
did.
sorry, Peter, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I heard two different things. I heard Tim say that there's no effect to the town if something goes bad with that drainage easement. And then my concern then from Eric is, what is the town's concern if that drainage fails?
Eric?
We do have sewer running, or there is the sewer main running through the back of the, I think there's a sewer easement running through there. Erosion of the site, it's fairly flat. Your risks are minimal. It's not like there's a town road directly adjacent to it. You have the rail trail adjacent to it. But it is kind of based on history that we try and get this maintenance agreement to ensure that the maintenance is completed, and if it is neglected and an issue did arise, then the town could step in, take care of the issue, and then the owner would reimburse the town for that. That's basically how the agreement is set up. Risks on the site, it's kind of hard to assess that right now. But it should be addressed.
Tim?
So
I
like-
guess my question.
Peter.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
No,
Yeah.
Peter, go ahead.
My question there is there any other way that it's enforceable to have them do it, as far as instead of the town getting involved, if it fails?
Well, I mean, the reality is you have an access issue if you don't have an agreement to see if it's failing. Jennifer?
Again, I'd like to say is that this will have a alteration of terrain permit, which requires them to maintain it and submit those forms if asked. So it's not just the town that is trying to enforce these, detention ponds. It's also the state. I have worked with the state on several, sites where they've come in and said, you need to fix it, and they come back and it has to be fixed, and it is fixed. And, you know, they call me in to help them fix it. And so it's, you know, I've done this on many different occasions with clients. It doesn't fall directly on the town.
Okay. I'm going to recognize the applicant, Attorney Muller.
Thank you. The only issue that I do want to bring to the board's attention in terms of damage, now, the Canada case is indeed an extreme case, but it is typical that when you grant somebody the right to go on your land, regardless if it's a license or anything else, if you go on and you either disturb or damage the land, the expectation generally is that you're going to restore it. So there is a cost factor there that does come into play in most cases, because equipment going over grass, that's what happens. So that is another aspect. Again, that's beyond just the Canada. That's just a general requirement of basically every easement or any license that you do, that if you go on and you damage the property or disturb it, you're going to restore it, and that is a cost. That is the only other additional comment I had to make on it, outside the fact that the town, per the declaration, in fact, one of the changes suggested by town council focused on this provision is that if there is a provision here that's a condition of the land use approval, and if you want to make the proposed maintenance schedule a condition, you would have the right but not the obligation to enforce it. That's in there. That was, again, one of the provisions, and if you want to make it clear on that sentence, that it not only goes the age restriction, but the drainage improvements can do that as well.
Other board members? Jim?
So after listening to Jim's comments and Peter's questions, I'd like to amend my statement. I had time to think about it here for a minute. There could be an impact to Dan Little Brook if any of those systems were to fail, and that's the end result of the water. So I misspoke when I said there'd be no damage to the town. It would be a damage to Dan Little Brook if those did fail.
Anybody else? Any other thing that the board would like to discuss before I open the public hearing?
Barbara,
Phil?
going back to depending on the state to do any follow-up on reports, it's been often in the past, all the experiences that I've had with them, is that they don't have the manpower or they don't have the funding to follow up on all the reports, and they pile up on a desk at the DES.
Okay. Anything else before I open it up? All right, Patty. At this time, I'd like to open this matter up for public comment. There are no members of the public here. We're doing this meeting telephonically, so they are online. Actually, David Pierce points out to me that he is technically recused from this. I didn't have him remove himself from the table because just of the spacing and the issues that we have here in the building. So David Pierce is here. Is there anybody online, Patty, who is raising their hand?
They haven't yet, but I can unmute them right now if you'd like, and
You're opening the public hearing?
So it is, oh, the public hearing is open at this point in time.
they would have to press star 9, I believe.
If somebody is listening and wants to participate, they need to press star 9.
Or if you'd like, I can just unmute them and,
Oh, no, I would just unmute them in case they want to say anything.
Okay.
Is there anybody online that is listening, watching this meeting that would like to make a comment about this plan? I thought we had somebody call
you
in.
do, you have Jeremiah online who's an abutter, and you have the applicant that is on the line as well.
Jeremiah, did you want to say anything in regards to this plan?
Well, my comments weren't related to this particular aspect of the plan that's been discussed. It wasn't related to the waivers, so.
No, that's all right. This is a public hearing. We've sort of heard this plan a couple of times, so we're concentrating on the waivers tonight. But Jeremiah, if you could just give us your full name, feel free to make a comment on any aspect of this plan.
Okay. My name is Jeremiah Lamson, Lamson, with REF Corporation, who owns the Villa Augustina
Okay?
parcel. And comment was just relating to one of the things that's come up about the requiring a sewer easement. And I have spoken with the applicant and been told that the plan is just easement that allows the villa to continue having the same sewer access that it had previously. But it was mentioned at the last planning board that there was something about a restriction, and I just wanted to make sure that if this plan does get approved with a condition for a sewer easement, that it stays, it doesn't change the access rights that
The Villa property has.
for the villa property.
Okay. Jennifer, do you want to address that? I saw you moving your head.
Absolutely. Today, they have their force main that goes into an 8-inch gravity line that traverses the property to the interceptor.
Yeah.
And we're going to be shortening up their force main, but providing them an 8-inch line so that they can discharge into, that will bisect the property and go into the interceptor. So it's,
Barbara,
Joanne?
that is included as condition 19.
So I can read so that everybody is aware of it. If this is to be approved, it has been proposed that condition 19B provides sewer easement for lot 561 for the use of the proposed 8-foot gravity sewer main from the existing force main to the town sewer interceptor pipe. This is to be recorded at the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds. Sewer staff cannot locate the existing easement, but to go through, but it's acknowledged it's there, and the document will be required prior to the signing of the plan set. I believe the applicant is aware of that condition and will comply with it.
Yeah, our concern wasn't so much, because we've spoken with the applicant and aware of what their plan is. Our concern was that the planning board doing something different.
Oh, yeah, no, we're not gonna do. If that's the plan, that's on the plan that's before us, we won't be changing that.
Mhm.
Do you have any other comments or questions, Jeremiah?
No, that was our biggest concern, because at the last meeting, somebody from the planning board at this very end of the meeting made a comment about it being restricted, and we wanted to make sure that that's not the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, David.
Thank you, Barbara. My-
David Pierce, Mill Street, Goffstown, New Hampshire.
I'm here as representing the Friends of the Gulfstown Rail Trail. I'm the treasurer and vice president of that organization. In practical terms, though, I'm a project engineer for the organization, We're a nonprofit, volunteer organization. We coordinate very closely with the Park Department, and where it's appropriate, we seek permission from the Select Board to design, fund, and construct the 5.5-mile park that's known as the Gulfstown Rail Trail. I'm aware of the Planning Department having a recommendation for the applicant's development, and specifically it's condition number 12 of the suggested conditions of approval. And that condition reads that the applicant would rehabilitate the current 10-foot width of the rail trail by adding 4 inches of nitpack, Mount Williams nitpack or the equivalent, to restore the trail crown and facilitate drainage over 875 feet. To be done prior to the last building certificate of occupancy. The point I need to make is the following phrase of that condition. All of that would be contingent upon, 1, an erosion site that is there today that's caused by snowmobile access to be repaired by the town. The horizontal location of the 10-foot wide trail would be staked by the town. The Select Board would accept this planned donation of trail improvement that would occur during the Mass Road Crossing project. And fourthly, that all required permitting shall be the responsibility of the town. The 4 contingencies I just read are items my organizations routinely do in our role of assisting the Park Department, and I offer that our organization will accomplish them on behalf of the town. Specifically, the repair of the erosion by snowmobile. It's within our normal maintenance capability of doing that. We're willing to fund sufficiently the cost of that project. The horizontal survey for the location of the trail is something I personally have done for all of our recent projects, and our organization will do that for this project. On number 3, on all the projects that have been arranged by the Friends of the Rail Trail, whether they were funded privately or they were funded through grants, our organization appears before the Select Board and we ask for their acceptance of a pending donation of trail improvement. My organization will do the same on behalf of the developer. Fourthly, we have the issue of accomplishing necessary permitting. I really regard that as a technicality that has to be mentioned, but in reality, the issue is mute, as the Gulfstown Rail Trail parcels are exempt from the requirements of the New Hampshire Comprehensive Shoreland Protection Act, per a letter that the town has from the Department of Environmental Sciences dated 4 February 2011. So as far as permitting is concerned, essentially having the Select Board accept the trail construction donation has always been, in effect, the permit to begin construction. In wrapping up, I propose that upon my organization completing these 4 contingencies, that we'll provide a letter to the Planning Department. The Planning Department can in turn endorse that letter to the developer, informing him that the contingencies have been accomplished, and then he can proceed with his obligation to construct the trail. That's my offer to do that work on behalf of the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara,
Joanne?
the other, just to add to what David had said, if you look at condition number 12, please eliminate
The first 3 lines.
the 3 lines and the first 3 words of the 4th line. The condition should start with rehabilitating.
Right. Okay. All right, the public hearing is still open. Is there any other member of the public that would like to make a comment on this plan? All right, I'm not seeing anybody. You see anybody out there with a hand raised?
No, I am muted both of them.
Okay. So now they're both muted.
No, they're not.
All right, okay, they're both unmuted, I'm not seeing anybody. So at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing on this plan for map 5, lot 60. We heard some public comment in regards to some conditions that have been recommended. Are there any other comments or questions from board members in regards to this plan before I look for someone to make a motion of some sort, which would need to address with waivers in the first instance?
Madam Chair?
Robert, I have just a question on the wording of those conditions number 12 and 13, where it says a deed acceptable to the town. A deed in normal use means a conveyance of a property interest. I'm not sure that's the right word. What are you talking about, Joanne?
Joanne, can you address condition number 13?
And 12, is the usage of the word deed. Somebody tell me what you
No.
what you mean by that.
On
Deed.
12, cross out everything on 12. That was a cut and paste error. 12 starts with the word rehabilitating. So there is no deed in condition 12. Joanne, can you address condition 13?
I think Jim was talking about being.
Did we lose Joanne?
No, she's still on. Joanne?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I
Yes.
can hear you.
Sorry, I had it on mute. The condition, well, going back to Jim, eliminate the first 3 lines and the first 3 words of the 4th line under 12. I don't think you heard that from before. So there is no deed for the rail trail. Number 13 is, we need to receive a deed that would have to do with the owner and public service, and that's so that they can use some of their land as an access. And we're waiting to get that final language, so that would be a condition prior to the plan being signed.
Jim? I think Jim's point is, what's the town interest in that deed?
There
What is that?
none. We have to just make sure that it's received.
What is it?
The deed. The deed.
What deed? They're not conveying a property interest.
It has nothing to do with the town. It's just well, it does. Jennifer's saying it does, so Jennifer, why don't you explain it, please?
We need an easement deed from, 2 easement deeds from Public Service for the sewer to cross their land to get to the interceptor, and then an easement deed for the eastern section to be able to cross over their land to get access to the rail trail. So that's what the deeds
Okay.
are.
These are just for, between the owner and Eversource, the public service then.
Right.
We
Okay.
need to make sure it's actually accomplished before the plans are signed.
Okay, it's clearer now, thank you.
Okay. All right, Jennifer's raising her hand reluctantly.
Yeah, I just have one comment that I want to make regarding the impact to Dan Littlebrook from the detention ponds. If you look at, you have that 100-foot buffer, and especially from this detention pond, there's a large field in between that's relatively flat. As again, what I said is that the outlet to that pond is very well seen by everyone from the road and whatnot, so that if there was an erosion concern happening, you'd know it immediately, and it would be easily fixed by probably just a shovel and a rake and some seed. This one over here, it's gonna be a little bit more enclosed, but then again, it outlets down here where you have a flat area that goes through the woods, which is still a 100-foot buffer until you get to Dan Little Brook. These are not large detention ponds by any stretch of the imagination, and the erosion should be caught relatively quickly to be able to be maintained. And it's not gonna take a whole lot to be able to fix them.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions on this plan? All right. If anybody is inclined to approve this, the first thing that would need to be done would be a motion to accept or approve the requested waiver, and I'd prefer to do them one by one. Development regs, section 4C23 for the lighting requirement. Is there any further discussion on that issue? Is there any motion on that issue? Tim?
I'll make a motion to grant the waiver for the lighting requirement based on the statements from the applicant regarding the positioning of lights and the type of lights that will be on the buildings.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Peter has seconded it. This is for the waiver request for the lighting requirement. If there's no further discussion, I'm going to call for a vote. Tim?
Yes?
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
I vote yes. Kimberly?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
All right, the waiver request for the section 4C23 has been granted. The second waiver request is pursuant to our zoning 1662, school impact fees. Is there a motion in regards to a request for a waiver of the school impact fees? Tim?
I'll make a motion to grant the waiver request for the school impact fees based on the amended statements regarding the occupancy and the ages that was provided by the applicant tonight.
Is there a second?
This is Peter, I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this waiver? Seeing none,
I do want to,
Jim?
this is Jim. If we grant this, this will be the second, and I'm gonna reject any concept that we're bound by past decisions. We'd never be able to correct our mistakes if that were the case. But at some point, it will look like a trend. So, you know, we can say, well, we did it for the project on the other side of the river, but we're not gonna make that mistake again and not grant it here, and I'd be good with that. But if you wanna grant it, yeah, at some point, you are establishing a administrative gloss, if you wanna call it that, of how we're interpreting school impact fee. So there's some significance to granting it here. And if we're prepared to do it, then it's gonna be harder at some future point to go in the other direction. I just wanted to make sure people ponder for a minute before they say yes, or at least ponder for 10 seconds or so.
Barbara, can I have 10 seconds?
Peter?
So, Jim, with what you're saying is this if because we granted it once, we can't grant it again because we may be setting a precedent?
No, I'm always gonna say we're not bound by prior decisions, but we keep getting it thrown at us that, well, you did it before, you have to do it here. And the more often we do it, the more appealing that argument becomes. I'm never gonna agree to it. I'm always gonna say, no, we can change our mind, as long as it's not discrimination for a protected class. But it just does become harder.
I understand.
Could I
Karen?
voice my opinion here, Barbara?
Karen?
Yeah, so I'm with Jim, but on the other hand, I feel like the applicant really truly has bent over backwards in hearing our concerns and, making amendments to the documentation about when things, who can reside in the condominiums. And so I think in this particular circumstance, they've done what we've requested. I don't necessarily think that we're setting precedents because of the way the applicant has responded to our requests and our concerns.
All right, any other comments on the motion before I call for a vote? All right, seeing none. Tim?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
No.
Phil?
No.
Peter?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. The waiver from zoning reg 1662 has been granted. The next waiver requested is for the closed drainage system. This deals with Appendix C, Section 4A. We haven't talked about that as much. There were no issues raised at the 423 meeting. Is there a motion on this?
Make a motion, we approve the closed drainage plan.
Peter has moved to approve the waiver.
Waiver for the closed drainage plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Tim has seconded it. All right, is there,
I have a question.
Jim?
It's Jim. I'm forgetting now what either Eric or Sarah said on this. Is there a concurrence from Public Works on this?
Yeah, I believe there was never an issue with that. I think the drainage worked out fine. Nothing was expressed to me by Sarah during her review. So I think we're good on our end.
Did you hear that, Jim? Thank you.
I did.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna call, seeing no further discussion, I'm gonna call for a vote. Tim?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
The chair votes no. The last item is the infiltration pond access. We've sort of talked around this a few times. There was discussion about having requirements for seeing the maintenance agreement and having a condition that the failure to perform the drainage would be a material issue and allow us to revoke the site plan. Is there any motion in regards to granting a waiver from Appendix C, Section 5T2 in regards to access to the infiltration ponds? Anybody inclined to make a motion to approve or not approve?
I'll make a motion to deny.
Phil has.
I'll second.
Phil has made a motion to deny, and the motion has been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'm gonna call for a vote. This is a vote to deny the waiver request in regards to the infiltration pond access. Tim?
No.
So that's a no on the denial.
You'd have to say yes to be in favor of the motion. So I'm
Correct.
saying no.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Karen?
No.
Jim?
Yes, yes. This is a yes, we have no bananas vote. Yes, I'm in favor of the motion.
You're in favor of the motion to deny, okay. Kimberly?
Yes, I'm in favor of the motion to deny.
Phil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. So the waiver for the infiltration pond access has been denied. My count on that is 5-2.
It's for continuance. Madam Chair?
Yep.
May we please ask for a continuance of this plan then?
Yes. I mean, I'll leave that up to the board. When would you like it continued to?
It's hard not being able, can I take a minute to talk to
Yeah,
my client?
Yeah, go ahead,
Please.
take a break.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
But they do, the May 28th meeting is extremely full.
Yeah, they can't come on the May
Okay,
28th.
I
I've
just
already
wanted-
seen that.
Boy, that
agenda.
is a
We
full
can't do
list,
it.
5
There's
of
just
them.
no way. All right, we're gonna suspend the deliberations on this project until the applicant comes back in. There is the issue of the appointment of CIP committee members. Gail, we have Patty with us tonight, and Patty is the backbone of the CIP process. So Patty, why don't you bring us up to date on what's been happening with CIP?
Nothing.
I like its short answer.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, it's just time we gotta get going, so you need to appoint your chairman, your vice chairman, and Gail is willing to be member at large again and get the ball rolling on getting the committee going, which will begin in June, but it doesn't, it still comes back to the planning board for their presentation the same time period. But we just gotta start getting, the committee started. The department heads all know they have to start submitting their requests in. So that's basically it.
All right. So we have had a chair and a vice chair in the past. And my recollection is that would be Jim Raymond and Tim.
Jim was
Jim
chair.
Raymond and Tim Redmond. Again, these names are very hard for me tonight. Gentlemen, have you been approached about continuing in that capacity? And do you agree, Mr. Raymond?
I'm not sure I've been approached, but yes, I agree.
I'm sorry. What about Tim? And Tim is nodding his head that he agrees. Patty, should we do a motion on this?
Yes.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve of Jim and Tim as representatives, chairman and vice chairman to the CIP.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? And Gail, actually, thank you for making that motion, and I believe we do actually appoint Gail as a member at large,
Yes,
correct?
you would
So-
do that.
So, Phil and Karen, do you agree to include that in your motion?
That's right, but not as chairman or vice
Right,
chairman.
as a member at large. No, she's shaking her
Yeah.
head. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, I'm gonna call for a vote. Jim, yes, what?
Yeah, I'm going to take the vote, but I have one other request for you to consider. But first, have Tim and me appointed before we wiggle away in the night.
All right, so let me call the vote. Tim,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kimberly,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes,
I vote yes. Jim,
The issue is, as our regs or our rules for the CIP are written, there's only one planning board member who's a voting member, which is a disincentive for example, Tim to come to meetings if he's not gonna be able to vote, or you can't keep him quiet, but if he's not also told to vote, he just doesn't have a reason to go, and I don't know why we should, since it is a planning board committee with other members of the community on it, we don't let there be two voting planning board members. So the chair and the vice chair or somebody else can participate and vote on matters. We don't have to decide that now, but I
I think we should.
change the rules sometime before we start, but I think we don't need to handcuff or limit ourselves to the planning board. because CIP is basically a planning function.
What's the number on the committee as it stands? What's the number?
I think there's
Well,
8.
We,
School,
Earl Carroll left town, who was one of our municipal reps, and we had at least one other. It's been a small number. It's quality instead of quantity, but Gail is the at-large. You have the school board and the select board. Gail, me, sometimes it's a pretty small group. We're very efficient, but we're really not representative. So
All right, so we need to,
school board, budget committee,
and so why don't in the next packet, we get the CIP membership included, and we'll try to address that. The applicant has come back in regards to map 5, lot 60. So I'm gonna reopen the hearing on map 5, lot 60. They went outside to discuss the current situation. Jennifer?
Okay, for us to be able to provide access to those detention ponds, we're gonna have to lose a few units, and I would wanna have the planning board approve that final plan. So that's gonna, I'm gonna have to do some redesigning, and, so I'm thinking the second meeting in June, because I'm gonna have to redesign it, it has to go back to the town for them to review it, to then come, DPW is gonna have to take a look at it and give their recommendations to then come back to you.
The second meeting in June would be June 25th. Does that sound right, everybody?
well, the first one's on the 11th, you have to do the math.
I'm fading fast. I think I did it right, but, all right, so it would be June 25th. So do I have a motion to continue this application to June 25th?
So moved.
Tim has moved the continuance. It's been seconded by,
Bill?
thank you. I'm gonna call for a vote. Tim?
Yes,
Karen?
Yeah.
Jim?
yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Thank you. So this is continued until the second meeting in June, which we believe is the 25th. But that
Thank
date's
you, Madam Chairman.
wrong. Thank you. That will occur. All right. Joanne, is there any other business for the board tonight?
memo?
Yes, I have, can you hear me?
Yeah?
I have, two other things, quick things. Actually three. One's on the agenda. It's, a memo that I prepared for the board on the recommendation of a revocation of site plan
Yep.
for map 20, lot 16, which is the property that's being used for some sort of automotive business. It's the former,
All right, it's at the corner of 114, 114A. It's the blue building on the corner. We all know what building we're talking about.
Uptown Autos Overflow Center.
Right, it was originally approved to be it was a real estate agent, so it had a business, it had at least one apartment, and then it was approved in what appeared to be the garage area to be an overflow site for car mechanical work.
for Uptown Auto.
For Uptown Auto, who operated further, had a location operating further up Mast Road. The plan was signed, Uptown Auto ceased operations, and there appear to be ongoing operations in the building.
So, the code enforcement officer drafted two letters, one in January, one in April, and mailed them first-class mail and certified mail to both the owner of the property and the tenant. And basically it stated to contact the town to set up a TRC meeting, and we never heard from either one. So my recommendation would be to go forward at the next meeting on May 28th and vote to revoke the site plan. And then we have to, once the revocation takes place, we have to notify the owners, the abutters, the public, and if one of those people want to step forward and request a hearing, they may do so within 30 days.
So your proposal is to put this on the agenda for May 28th?
Correct. I just wanted to get the board's opinion before we move forward.
I'm in favor.
Why do we have to wait till the 28th? Why can't we do it tonight?
We have to-
Well, it was sort of a last minute placed on the agenda. I'd like to have it as an agenda item where, you know, the agenda's posted and people could at least see it. I don't want it to look like we're trying to do it in a way that people wouldn't know about it. But that's your call.
Well, I mean, we have this,
I agree with Phil. We keep kicking the can down the road.
yeah, this was brought up, I brought this up at the last meeting.
Well, you also haven't,
December, are you kidding me?
Well, what I meant was I re-brought it up.
all right, so you have in front of you, board members, in addition to Joanne's memo, an actual declaration of revocation, which lists the items that were on the site plan that have never been complied with, or certainly are not being complied with at this point in time. Tim?
Do we need to properly post a site revocation hearing in order to enforce it? My question goes to Joanne.
No, the RSA actually allows you to revoke the approval, and then before the revocation is recorded, you must notify everyone. Then, if someone does want a hearing, they would come forward and request a hearing within 30 days of that notification.
So if we revoked it tonight and somebody requested a hearing, we could put it on our first meeting in June, which has a substantially smaller agenda than our meeting in 2 weeks. Was that a yes?
Are you asking me?
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
all right. Other comments from board members?
Bob, this is Jim. In the past, and again, we don't have to do that, because the statute really gives you two routes. We've notified applicants of a hearing, given the 30 days notice, we have the hearing, and then we revoke, and then we can record. You can either have a trial and then hang them, or you can have hang them and then have the trial. And either way, this gets their attention immediately as the clock ticks. If you have the hearing, invariably they come in and promise to fix things. And so I'm not adverse to doing it this way, but it's not the only way of doing it.
I guess given the fact that there have been ongoing attempts to contact this owner, and knowing that the owner of this property has certainly been in town while he currently lives out of town, he certainly, I know, has been in the area, so I'm sure he knows what's going on. I think my preference might be to just go ahead and revoke it, and then when we get a hearing notice, we can schedule it appropriately in June, if somebody wants to hear something. We still have to wait. The abutter is having significant issues with the use of this property at this point, and this has been going on for a long time.
I don't disagree. I just want to make sure people know there's two routes.
Ask for a motion.
Well, we have tried the other route, and not with specifically, I don't remember if we mentioned the site revocation, but we had one other entity which had to be basically dragged in front of the board by the planning director.
All right, well, I'm gonna see if anybody wants to make a motion to,
I'll make a motion to go forward with the notice of revocation.
so you're,
I'd like to amend that and say we make the findings of violations as set forth on the draft notice 1 through 15, except that number 15 should say something other than the barn building should be empty. I mean, first you have to say it isn't empty. I don't know what was intended there. You gotta make that a little more specific. What's the violation? The barn/building should be empty. Well, what is it? Is it not empty?
Yeah, no approvals for occupancy have been granted, so yes, it's not empty. Okay,
And it's being occupied. You gotta say that.
okay. So the barn building is being occupied and no approvals for occupancy have occurred.
Okay.
All right, so that's been
I'll second Phil's
moved by
motion.
Phil and seconded by Tim. Is there any further discussion in regards to revoking the approval of a site plan granted to JEM 443 Mast Road LLC, 205 Pleasant Street, Hartlet, Maine, on tax map 20, lot 16? Seeing no discussion, I will call for a vote. Tim?
Yes,
I've lost my list.
Karen?
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Next item, Joanne.
The next item is something that was brought up at the last meeting, and Jim had a question about. If you remember, the board approved some lot line adjustment plans for the Grady property on East Dunbarton Road. The assessor sent them a letter asking that they provide the town with the new deeds, and they responded by saying they don't need to do that because the boundary line adjustment plan took care of that transfer. The planning board had not acknowledged that boundary line adjustment plan and required a lot line adjustment. So the assessor is now asking, is that boundary line adjustment plan sufficient, or should they still transfer the deeds that are needed for the lot line adjustment?
Barbara, may I be heard?
Yes, Jim, please.
If they're not under common ownership, the answer is yes, there has to be a deed, I think. A plan does not convey title.
Right.
A deed does. If they were all under common ownership, it was certainly in the nature of a subdivision. You don't require the applicant, developer to convey multiple deeds to itself to create the lots. The plan does it. But as I read the letter, there is a difference in ownership, so they do need a deed.
Correct, and that's what staff agreed to. But we wanted to get the planning board's opinion, and the owner is not complying.
What do you mean the owner is not complying? They're not responding, they're saying we don't need to, what's happening?
They're not providing the deed, which is what was asked for. They're saying that the boundary line is sufficient. So maybe he can send another letter saying, planning board agrees, this is what you need to do. The problem is he's trying to, put in the proper acreage for tax purposes, and he can't do that without the deed.
Right.
And that it's kind of causing some trouble, so.
But Jim, go ahead.
Did we require as a condition of the approval that there be a deed conveying the portion that's changed from one owner to other owners?
Guess not.
No, we should have, but.
Don't have that in front of me, but I'll check.
And if not, and they refuse to do it, I mean, it's not really effective until they do it. I don't think we can revoke the approval, but has the plan been recorded?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's a problem.
See, this was brought up in another application. The town doesn't record the deeds between private parties. We only record the deeds that have, the town is involved with it because of they're getting a deed or they're giving a deed. So that's one of the issues. We record the plans, but we don't really know if these deeds are being recorded or not.
And we don't make a condition subsequent or anything that there be a transfer.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
No.
Well, I think our assessor's correct though, and just.
Well, I think our only option at this point is to send a letter saying the planning board agrees the deed needs to be done.
Yeah.
And the taxes remain proportioned as the assessor currently has
Right,
them.
the assessor isn't gonna be making any changes, as far as I would see, until a deed comes in. Tim?
Is there a mechanism to recall a plan if something like this happens, or are we
Well,
stuck
if it's not a
with it?
condition, we don't have any basis to revoke it.
Is there an RSA to back us up that we could,
I'm not aware of any. Jim, are you aware of any RSA that would somehow allow something to be revoked in regards to deeds not being provided?
No, it's the revocation, since statute, we just acted under that, so the
Right.
condition either in the approval or in our regs that wasn't followed, it's material.
Well, so
we should, look at our regs sometime, but, otherwise, no.
So the taxes stay the same and, okay. But we
Okay,
agree,
I'll-
Joanne.
I'll follow up with the assessor.
Okay, last thing.
The last thing is, we are having Hoyle Tanner take a look at our development regulations, and they're not being paid to make changes, but they're being paid to review the document as a whole and make recommendations on where changes should be made. So one of the things that they have come across is they would like to recommend, I guess I would call it, they would like to recommend that we change the development regulations by removing the technical items. And in front of you, you should have a document from the town of Hudson called Engineering Technical Guidelines and Typical Details. And I just showed the table of contents just to show the types of things that they would like to take out and put in a separate document. Things like pavement, street design, sewer, water distribution, roadways, all the technical aspects of things, and put it in a separate book, or put it in a separate regulation, I should call it. And they're just asking if the board would be interested in them making that as a recommendation, so they wouldn't include, those things would no longer be included in the development regs, but another book. It's fairly common.
Jim.
Madam, may I be heard?
Yep, Jim.
You can't. In order for us to have the statutory authority to enforce them, they have to be part of our regulations, but they can be
Yeah.
a separate appendix to the regs.
Exactly.
They don't burden the regs, but it's not a separate regulation. It's still part of our development regs. It's just set out separately.
Correct.
Because we don't have jurisdiction over some floating regulations out there.
So, Joanne, do you think this would make the regulations more user-friendly, both for the town as far as addressing the issues and an applicant as far as following them?
I think what's helpful is, like, we had a book in Bookfit that we used that had a big long name to it and had a blue cover, and we called it the Blue Book. And that book was very helpful to the contractors because they really didn't care about things in the development regulations that pertained more to the planning board application process. They were more interested in, okay, plan's been approved, now what do we do? What do we need to build it? And so they were the ones who were interested in that separate book, and it kind of kept things separately as far as, almost the process itself. Like, here's here's the development regs that the planning board uses, and then here's the set of actual technical requirements, how to build the road and what's required and all of that. I haven't had a chance to talk to Eric about this, so I don't know if he's still there, but it would be nice to get his opinion.
Yeah, I haven't looked at this at all, but I think from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it'd be something I'd be interested to at least look at and talk about. I think the most important thing is making sure that they are referenced in the development regs. There is a lot of details. We have CAD drawings for different situations. So it's gonna be a pretty thick book to get it all worked out. We'd have to work with the sewer commission, to get the sewer details in there. You're also working with, 3 different water precincts in town, so, I don't know if we'd include waterworks in that also. But it's definitely something that sounds interesting enough, including driveways and stuff, just a simple go-to.
And the nice thing about it is everything would be in one place for the contractors, rather than having them go to the different precincts and town departments to get the details of things.
Okay, Tim?
So Joanne, is this geared to contractors, or is this geared to any applicant that wants technical data?
Well, it's geared to anyone, but it's extremely helpful to the contractors who are actually building whatever it is that they're doing, because everything is right there in that one book.
Thank you.
Having everything together, which it sounds like it's not now, would probably be a good idea, and I would think moving it from more the planning development regs would be a good idea. It is gonna end up as a budget item, though, because to put together those books from experience, we know requires, funding to put the book together. Is this something that Hooksett would charge contractors for to give them?
Yes, well, now that everything is online, most people just print it off themselves.
Oh, yes,
But they
the
did
wonderful
charge for the book, I think it was like $35
Create the
or
book.
something. It was quite thick.
Yeah, so
And-
it's a fair amount of money to create it. I mean, I think it's a fine recommendation. Let's see where it goes. But as you said, they're not being hired to redo the regs. They're making suggestions on what would make them better. So I certainly don't see any issues with it. How about other board members? Tim?
Well, if you're gonna if you're gonna recommend that they make recommendations, maybe we should ask for some sort of a budget if they think that they could do it for us as well and get it all in one package.
Well, I think, okay. Kimberly, what do you think?
I was just gonna say that I do work for Hoyle Tanner, but I am not working on this project.
Peter, what do you think of separating it out?
I think if we can get everything together in one book, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, make it easier for everybody. I understand there's a cost to put it together, to start with, but I think that after that, we'd be saving time with people having to meet with each department.
Phil, you okay with it?
Yeah, and I'm looking through the table of contents on here, and I think, though, there might be a few things that Public Works may want to include in here.
All right, but we're not talking about the details. We're talking about the concept of removing this stuff.
I understand. The concept I was just making a point, that's all.
Okay. David, what do you think?
Sounds good.
Dale, what do you think?
I think it sounds fine.
Jim, what do you think?
And my concern is what are items that were within our jurisdiction and what are not. But having them in one book is certainly useful. It's just maybe the adoption of chapters has to be done by the applicable board or agency, but then they're all put in there, and we incorporate by reference into our regs.
Yeah.
So section X of the Blue Book are part of the subdivision regs. Section Y is part of the sewer commission's
Well,
regs.
we're gonna have to pick another color or they'll all think they're in Hooksett, but yeah, okay, we can do that.
Yes, okay. Right.
All right, Joanne, is there anything else?
No, I think that covers it.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait, I wanna ask
Oh,
clarification.
Patty is chiming in now. Patty, what, yeah?
I just wanna make sure, so you've established the CIP committee, you're just talking about having two people vote?
Correct.
Like you both being able to
We're gonna
vote.
do that,
Okay.
yeah.
And I also would like to make sure that adequate representation from the other committees that normally,
You already have the school board appointed, we just don't have budget committee yet. I haven't
Okay.
heard from them yet.
okay, because sometimes we had lacking attendance from other participants.
Okay.
But not last year, Jim.
Okay, thank, it must have been your person, that was your personality, Jim.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Who seconded that?
Peter did.
Peter did, all right. All those in favor, Tim,
Aye.
David, you're not voting. Tim, Peter,
Yeah.
Phil, Karen,
Yes.
Kimberly,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Did I get everybody?
Jim votes yes, too.
Oh, sorry, Jim. Jim votes yes, and I think that makes it unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, thank you.
Good night.